Hello, and welcome to our new edition of Charity Pulse. I'm James Saunders. I'm from Morkington Smith Accountants, and with me today, as always, Catherine Rustromji from Shakespeare Martineau, Charles Mesquita from Quilter Cheviot. And we're going to get straight into it today because there's quite a lot to run through, quite a lot's been catching my eye in the last week or so. And I wanted to start really with TikTok and the news. Some articles recently that charities have been using TikTok more, encouraged to use TikTok more, how-to guides and encouragement being used. Obviously, this applies to a certain generation of which probably we three are not participants. But the question is, at the same time as America at the moment is trying to ban TikTok, and there is a bit of a battle between China and America on this. Are you aware that charities use TikTok? Should they be careful at the moment? Catherine, I mean, you're sort of closest, I would say, to that generation that might use it comfortably. So I'll come to you first and let
no.
Charles
I think
go
when they're
second.
trying to target middle-aged mothers in North Yorkshire, then no, I'm not on TikTok. But I do think, charities have used this before when, I've heard, for instance, animal charities talking about they're trying to teach next generation about caring for animals and educating them and using different platforms to spread education, rather than, I think sometimes we jump to suggest that it's all about fundraising and trying to get supporters on TikTok or Facebook to raise funds. But actually, I think it's more about trying to find your audience and share information with them and educate them. So I could fully understand that TikTok is the place to go to find that particular generation of younger people who are interested in causes and charities and want to be engaged with. So I think, in that sense, why shouldn't charities do it? And I think from the details I've seen, charities do think about their messaging and which platform are they using, who's their audience, what are they saying to them, what are they doing to them. So I kind of felt as though the situation in the States is quite different from charities in the UK and what they might be using it for, which I think all good for them. If that's working for them, great.
Okay, so to your point to why shouldn't they? Of course, the American argument goes that ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok, is controlled by the Chinese state. The argument goes, in as much as if it's not an ownership question per se, but it's controlled. It's the regulator. If the Chinese state, and this obviously there are plenty of examples, if the Chinese state says to TikTok, "Don't show this because we don't want you to show it," TikTok doesn't show it. I mean, there's plenty of examples of that, in China and outside. If China says, "Do this," TikTok does it. Now, at the same time, there's also a question about data. TikTok will have access to huge amounts of data. And again, this is the American argument goes, ultimately, if the Chinese state says to TikTok, "Give us that data," TikTok will give them that data, the argument goes. That fundamentally, so it's a question about censorship and a question about data. That actually it's worth noting that the UK government doesn't allow TikTok on UK government phones for espionage reasons. And that's very common around the world. Certainly the US government, Canadian government, none of them allow TikTok on government-owned devices.
Isn't that just is that not just because MPs can't be sensible with social media? So they should also take WhatsApp away from them on that basis. But yeah.
It could be a trust issue, but there is a sensitivity around data. I mean, their argument is data. They have to have reliability around the data. Charles, I'll come to you. I mean, you must be an avid TikTok user. You must be on there hours after hour.
I spend my life on social media. Not. No, I have to say these sorts of questions I have to refer to my two children who are teenagers who are much better qualified to comment on social media. I mean, I think like all these things, I mean, we all see it and hear it in the news, don't we, around social media being misused, political interference, misinformation, and how people source. I think from a charity's point of view, I mean, they're facing all the same challenges that all of us are in society as far as social media is concerned. And it's just another tool of which needs to be used. And actually, listening to that all three of us are not particularly au fait with TikTok or other forms of social media. That this to me, I think is a really good reason of why you need a diverse trustee board and why you need people of an age that do use it on the trustee board who are far better qualified to actually comment and how it should be used. I think the other thing that was quite interesting at Trustee Exchange, which I attended on Wednesday this week, there was a whole session on social media and policies that charities should adopt. And I have to say, sitting in there, I was just thinking to myself, oh no, not another policy that we've got to put in place. And actually, you know, how easy is it to control social media, because there's this huge blur, isn't there, between what the charity's doing and what we do as individuals personally, and then how does that connect, whether you're a member of staff or a trustee? And we've, you know, seen in the press, haven't we, in the charity press, of where those lines have got blurred and people have got criticized for it. You know, it's like anything that's new or relatively new. I mean, we are feeling our way with it. Big data in China, I suppose you could say the same thing about big data in the US government. I sometimes wonder why anybody be interested in anything that I do say or anything else. So I suppose in that respect, I sort of think they can have my data.
Well, they might if they could influence your vote. I mean, that's one of the key ones with so many elections this year in all sorts of different countries, and election interference being such a hot topic. Then data is important in that sort of thing. Actually, that kind of brings us on to another point around social media, and particularly X, formerly known as Twitter. And I happened to see my local MP, Greg Clark, who's an excellent MP, really, really very good, you know, long-standing local MP, put a post up on X about involving Parkrun, with Parkrun all over the post, linking to all sorts of, you know, everything. And we spoke a couple of months ago about the Charity Commission's response to Alistair Strathern's reference to Parkrun in a tweet. It probably was a post on X. Labour candidate at the time, now Labour MP, and the Charity Commission took Parkrun to task over it. So I'm wondering what the difference is between that and this, really, because this is even more overt. Even more, you know, that was the previous post. The Alistair Strathern one was a post mentioning Parkrun. This has got logos and brandings and all sorts of stuff about celebrations. Again, Catherine, thoughts?
Yeah, I did just think it's really inconsistent, isn't it? And this is where I think for the Charity Commission, surely they need to prioritise the things that they get involved with and the things they comment on to actually be the most important cases that are crossing their desk, because that previous post didn't tag them, didn't have any, you know, prominent reference to the charity. But the Charity Commission, I thought, came down quite hard on that. And they were talking about, you know, the charity needed to protect itself and be independent from party politics. And then this post is very prominent. I mean, it's at number 10. It's got Rishi in it. You know, it's so prominent. And I sort of think, well, then if you hadn't got involved previously, we wouldn't be questioning now, why are you not getting involved in this case? I think for me, it was about the inconsistency of the regulator and how you can be made to look as though you are perhaps favouring one party over another, or being inconsistent generally in how you respond.
Charles, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the original one was a bit of a storm in the teacup, and when you look at the post, and I don't follow Twitter, but or X, you know, and it did seem to be. I mean, the problem with all of these things is that, you know, however anybody wants to sanitize it, charities are always going to be dealing in politics just by the very definition of what they do. And, you know, it's getting that right balance of making sure that the intentions of what is happening are for the right reasons. You know, I mean, if we think about Parkrun, I mean, that's been a phenomenal success, hasn't it? 20 years going from nothing to, I mean, today, I think something like, you know, over 2,000 events a year in 23 countries. I mean, it's just extraordinary of, you know, both from people's health, the money that's been raised for charities, people's engagement and involvement, you know, those sorts of things we should be celebrating and doing that in spades and looking at the positive. I think MPs need to be as careful as charities when it comes to not misusing situations with a different agenda. But I think that's a very difficult thing to police. And yes, I think that the Charity Commission's original investigation was probably they possibly didn't need to do it in the way that they did it.
Yeah, good.
But I mean, it's, you know, hindsight.
Yeah. The third point really was an article by Andy Rickett, actually, referencing Dame Helen Stevenson's swan song in the role in her role at the Charity Commission. Concerned that candidates for charity leadership positions could be put off because they're not prepared to bear their lives to the harsh light of unrelenting scrutiny. Catherine, you pointed this one out. You know, the charities are on trial just for doing their job. I mean, does it ring true with you?
No, I just thought there's quite a, it was very emotive language, quite strongly written, I suppose, in terms of saying, it's unfair that charity leaders are subject to scrutiny. But I was also looking at thinking, well, why would they not be subject to scrutiny in the same sense that any other leader would be? If they are prominent, if they are courting public opinion, which often they are. I did wonder about what's the definition of a leader? Are we including trustees in that? Or is this about paid chief executives, that they deserve everything they get? I wasn't quite sure, but I also hated some of the language. I mean, on trial just for doing your job, was a bit, is this the court of public opinion? Are we going down this route? So I did think there was a bit of a, where has this come from? And is that quite right? But I also think for many trustees, they say, no, we are ambassadors, we represent our charity, and we are happy to be held to account and to demonstrate what a good job we're doing. So I just thought it'd come out of left field, really. I wasn't sure that this is something I'm coming across, that it's a complaint that is regularly referenced to me.
And it is linked to the point that Charles was mentioning earlier about, charities do get involved in topical issues, in matters that matter to people, and it does mean that you're going to be in the limelight. I mean, probably more so than the equivalent organisation in the commercial world, but that's the reality of what you're getting into. Charles, any thoughts?
Yeah, sadly, I didn't sit in that particular session, only because we'd had a roundtable. Hadn't we, chat with Helen Stevenson a few weeks prior, and I thought we probably had covered most of it. Yeah, I have to say it's not something that that I'd come across, and it would have certainly surprised me if I'd heard her say that. The only thing I think the sector needs to be very careful about is it doesn't become too preachy and too holier than thou and too everything, sort of the wringing of the hands and not enough money and the thing. So I think it's a bit like Park Run. You can look at the negativity of it, but you can look at also the actually what a wonderful success that has been. And there are so many charities that have got so much to celebrate. I really don't. Yeah, I can't say I see this as a massive issue, and I can't say that I can see in the press any particular chief executive or trustees being berated. I suppose the last one that really had I have to say I wouldn't have wanted to be in the firing line would have been Kids Company, and that obviously did have quite a lot, but there was a reason for that. Whether that was right or wrong, time has I suppose told the full story. So yeah, I don't know why that's a particular issue, because the other one was around banking, wasn't it? Was the thing that Helen Stevenson was focusing on as one of her sort of parting comments going out.
Yeah. Good. Okay. A quick couple of plugs just to finish with. It's the Charity Retail Association's More Than a Shop campaign this week. So go and see your local charity shops. Trying to reiterate, charity shops are a source of 75.3 billion pounds of social value each year, from their own report from a couple of years ago. And this campaign to celebrate and raise attention to the fact that charity shops not just about shopping, it's also about community hub, social and reuse functions. And so go to your charity shops. Been to a charity shop recently, Catherine?
There's a great charity shop, Yorkshire Cancer Research in Harrogate, very much community hub, cafe, cake, shops,
very
everything
nice.
I like in life.
Very nice. And that's exactly what this campaign is making, I think. And finally, there is Charles has campaigned before in a loose sense about VAT reform. There was a little VAT adjustment for charities recently. just about donated goods. Ironically, if donated goods don't get given away by a charity, used by a charity, there's VAT payable on them where there isn't if they get given away. It's kind of one of those nuances. Just a little, not a loop, a little nuance being closed. So some VAT news for you, Charles, just to brighten your day. Charity VAT. Other than that, we're all done there. Thank you very much for your attention. Nice to see you all. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube podcasts. So please do follow, like, approve, comment, and whatever on those. We're also the webcast, the webinar itself will be on our usual website sources as well. So let us know of any ideas you have for any topics you want us to cover. But other than that, thank you both. Nice to see you, and see you soon.